Okay, Befale here, back with the newest installment of Rising Up. In my previous videos, I've covered pretty much everything you should theoretically know in order to really understand the mechanics of a Street Fighter match. But deriving the practical from the theoretical can often be really difficult. I've known plenty of players who understand all the mechanics, but don't know what to actually do once they're playing the game. So in this video, I'm going to try and sort that out for you. This is a video on what to do in neutral. Neutral is the blanket term for all the times during the match where both players have full control of their characters and full access to all their tools. For the record, knockdowns, combos, and punish scenarios would be a few examples of instances that aren't neutral because one player doesn't have control over their character anymore. I've been trying to make this guide as general as I can so that you can understand it regardless of which character you're using. But the honest truth is, what you want to be doing is going to vary a lot based on both your character and your opponent's character. Every character has a range where their tools are particularly effective. Zangief has quick and powerful untechable grabs that make him extremely dangerous up close. Yet from afar, Zangief can do almost nothing. Dalsim has access to many long-range attacks. But Dalsim's close-range normals are somewhat slow and do very low damage. So Zangief's objective against Dalsim is to get very close and threaten damage with his throws, while Dalsim's objective is to use his normals and fireballs to halt Zangief's approach. That was an extreme example. In most matchups, the goals of both characters will be more dynamic, with both players rapidly switching between offense and defense depending on the direction of the match. Even still, what you're trying to do in a Street Fighter match is always heavily based on how far you are from your opponent. Figuring out the various ranges where your tools are most effective for each matchup takes time and experience, but you don't need to do all the work yourself. You can easily find match footage through YouTube or the CFN, and watching a pro player using your character can give you a good idea of what tools you should be using and at which ranges. Watching how characters play can also give you a better idea of who you want to main if you're still on the fence. Technically, that advice is so good that I could end the video now, but I'm going to go over some basic universal tactics when trying to play offensively or defensively, both from up close and far away. Remember that this is just going to be a quick overview of a very complicated metagame, and in reality there's more to it than I can summarize here. I encourage you at this point to already have a character in mind that you want to play. It's not set in stone. Learning multiple characters is beneficial in the long run, and you can always change mains. And I encourage you to learn a basic punish combo and a few hit confirms for that character. I've compiled my character combo notes in the first link in the description. Before I talk at length about how to approach or keep away, however, I want to talk for a little bit about jumping. Jumping has significant applications for both offense and defense, and can be extremely effective or extremely risky, depending on how it's used. There's generally a rather specific range where jumping is effective. If you jump from very far out, none of your air attacks will reach the opponent. This is not very risky, but not very rewarding. If you jump from too close, you'll fly over your opponent's head and they can potentially hit you out of the air or hit you as you land. This is a little risky and not very rewarding, so it's generally only used as a desperation corner escape. But at mid-range, a jump can lead to extremely high damage combos. Even if a jumping attack is blocked, it's safe and it lets the jumper then put on additional pressure. This makes jumping in at these ranges extremely rewarding, especially at the low level where they're not often punished, and beginners often tend to learn jump-in combos and jump extremely frequently rather than learning proper movement. But while jump-ins resolve quickly, they are not instant. A jump is quite reactable, and as I said in Rising Up Part 1, you cannot block while jumping. Certain grounded attacks are really good at consistently punishing jumps. An attack with good upward range, low vulnerability, or invincibility that's used to beat jump-in attacks on reaction is called an anti-air. Just about every character has a few anti-airs that hard counter almost every jumping attack, and because jump-ins are so rewarding, you must be extremely prepared to punish them. Even though anti-airs aren't generally combos, I've listed them at the beginning of all my B&B combo guides just because they're so essential and fundamental. Now, let's talk about how to approach the opponent if you're an offensive character trying to get close. The most common and most universal tactic is to simply walk forward. Almost every other option I'm going to talk about will carry some risk, but walking forward is great because you can start blocking at any time. When approaching, it's very important to be ready to block at a moment's notice. You should also be aware of your opponent's farthest reaching normals, so you know how much you can approach safely before the opponent can reasonably stop you. Having to block a normal isn't so bad in Street Fighter, and it lets you easily test at what ranges the opponent gets nervous or likes to attack. Then, you can hang around that range and see if you can get them to whiff the normal in front of you. You can use this time to approach, or even attack their extended limb before it can recover. This is known as a whiff punish. Merely approaching can force the opponent to walk back to stay at their optimal range, and once they're cornered you can very easily walk in and force the pressure. While walking in and out, it can be good to hit your own normals at their max ranges to try and tag the opponent. At best, you hit them, and at worst, you push them back a bit. This is called poking. Poking's main use is to halt approach, but it's not bad when approaching either, since the person approaching usually has more control over the distance from the opponent, and thus they can put themselves at the optimal ranges more easily, and act more immediately once they reach those ranges. Heavy normals with crush counters are particularly good here, since they're not usually too risky from this far out, and you can generally get a small combo plus a guaranteed approach if you manage to get that crush. You can get in much more quickly with a forward dash or a forward jump, but this is a bit of a beginner's trap. A forward dash will let you surprise your opponent by rapidly closing in, which could give you a free throw or a free counter hit. But you can't block during your forward dash, so you might run into any attack the opponent happens to throw out. If the opponent is anticipating a dash, he can even use specific strategies to preempt the dash and punish you. I'll talk more about this when I talk about halting approach. Additionally, depending on the speed of your dash, the opponent can simply react and hit you before you have time to hit him. A forward jump is dramatically more rewarding than a forward dash, since again, if you hit the opponent with your air normal you can get a full combo, and if you're blocked, the pressure you put on is covered by the jumping attack. However, jumping is much more reactable than a dash, and thus more likely to be punished. Even at mid-level, most players will be ready to anti-air your jumps almost all the time. I'd say jumping too much is one of the most common problems beginners deal with. Even still, it's not a bad idea to test the waters with a jump or two, and see if your opponent is ready to anti-air. If the opponent can't demonstrate the ability to stop your jumps, even at specific ranges, you can use this to get a lot of free approaches. There is a bit of a trick to jumping, even if the opponent demonstrates the ability to anti-air you. Many characters' effective anti-airs will change based on how far away you are when you jump, and sometimes they won't have a good option to hit you at all. If you jump from these safe ranges, you can get a lot of free approach. And if you jump without attacking, your body stays very narrow, so you can potentially bait out some highly committal anti-air attacks. Once the opponent is afraid to anti-air, you can start mixing in jumping attacks to get free approaches. I think it's also worth mentioning that certain characters have air special moves that can upset common anti-airs. Most characters only approach using walking, dashing, and jumping, but there are some character-specific special moves that also allow you to approach. These are usually good to mix in, but have some significant weaknesses. Most commonly, they often cost a bar to do, or cost a bar to make safe. And they're usually minus on block. I talked about this phenomenon briefly in my combos video, but as a recap, if a move is minus on block, it means the opponent will recover before you do, which means they'll be able to hit buttons before you can, and thus, they will generally counter-hit your buttons with their own. Even if you're not unsafe, opponents can often respond to your approaching move by pushing you right back out. Or worse, by putting offensive pressure on you. So while you can use these moves to get in, you generally do it at the expense of your offensive presence. Now, if the opponent has a fireball, the game changes quite a bit. A fireball can easily halt your walking or dashing, and at most ranges it'll beat all your normals. Even if you block it, it deals some chip damage and pushes you out. And if you jump in on reaction to most fireballs, you can even get anti-aired. This might seem quite strong, but it's really pretty fair. First off, fireballs are very committal in Street Fighter V. Fireballs are extremely weak to jumps, and if you jump in anticipating a fireball, you can get huge damage. Good opponents will throw a lot of fireballs when afar, but turn off their fireballs when close enough for you to jump. The important thing is to learn to see risky fireballs and to try and spot a pattern. I want to stress now that it's not so bad to block 1 or even 10 fireballs and simply walk back in after blocking. But from most ranges, you can easily neutral jump to avoid a fireball without giving up any space. Be aware that if the opponent is far enough away, or has a sufficiently slow fireball, they can follow it in and punish you for your jump. Still, a neutral jump over fireballs carries little commitment or risk. There are many character-specific ways around fireballs. It should go without saying, but if you have your own fireball, you can easily use it to nullify theirs. Almost every super in the game can be used to punish fireballs on reaction, even some you wouldn't expect. Many characters have EX moves that can punish fireballs on reaction from certain ranges. V-skills rarely punish fireballs, but there are plenty of V-skills that nullify them, often giving the user V-meter in the process. I intended for this to be one video, but the subject matter is just so complex that I've actually written enough to fill 4 videos. In light of this, I'm going to cut this one here. Rising Up 4 will talk about what to do once you've gotten close and want to press the offense. Rising Up 5 will talk about how to keep the opponent from approaching from afar. And Rising Up 6 will discuss what your options are if the opponent has gotten in or knocked you over.